And then with Terrell Johnson's case, Officer Agier engaged in a foot pursuit, which hasn't come up here yet today, that is essentially against Bureau policy and failed to follow several aspects of the foot pursuit policy, which led to Terrell Johnson's death. And there was no accountability for that. There's a lot of information in the report about words. They talked about the officer has no other option and suicide by cop. We're very glad they're addressing those issues. We've also raised issues about the use of the word de-escalation in the case with Mr. Boucher. They said that he was, an officer went to go get a less lethal weapon. They described that as de-escalation, but I would say anytime you bring a weapon on, that's not de-escalation. It could be mitigation of force from a live weapon, but it's not de-escalation. There's multiple common sense violations that happened that weren't discussed either by the police review board or by commanders, and ultimately people weren't held accountable for them. As Dr. Haynes said, many of these recommendations are things the community's been saying for years. We do support just about everything that OIR recommended to you. We appreciate their bringing up the history of Portland's racism in their opening of their report this time, but we're in the context of multiple shootings of African Americans in the city since Donald Trump was elected, and we need to be talking more about that issue as well.
Very good, thank you. Thank you for preparing written testimony as well. I appreciate that. Very good. Next up, Chief Outlaw, and I believe Captain Jeff Bell from DPD Internal Affairs. We're going to give the Portland Police Bureau response to the report. Thank you for being here. And Chief, in particular, I know you are probably going on close to 24 plus hours without sleep, so I particularly appreciate your being here.
Good afternoon, Council Commissioners. I think my response to the report was pretty self-explanatory in the sense that, yes, we do agree. I don't want to sound cliche or like a broken record, but I just want to use this time to reinforce how seriously we take not only the analyses provided by OIR, but just the nature and the content of the report. I also recognize that a lot of the cases investigated happened a long time before my arrival, but I want to publicly acknowledge that we've also had a recent spate of officer-involved shootings in a very short period of time recently, and I wanted to, again, reaffirm to the public that we will do everything that we can to make sure that the investigations are not only thorough, but complete and timely and as transparent as possible. I know you might have some follow-up questions for us as far as what's been implemented thus far, what we plan to do for the future, but I would like to say this: 2019 is about solutions. I think it's about action plans, and it's about follow through. And I think it's very important, as was mentioned, that there are some things we're just not going to be able to see. Hopefully, it shows a positive by us not seeing it through omission. But I think it's very important to have action plans, to have very clear tasks and responsibilities, to ensure that there's systems in place so we can go back and report out on these tasks very completely and thoroughly. A couple of things I want to talk about. One of the constant things that I saw when I first got here, it's been about 15 months since I've been here, and one of the constant things in the first report that I had a chance to review from OIR and this report as well was the theme of sergeants jumping into tactical positions. And I identified very early on, along with staff, that we do ourselves a disservice, not just with training, but it's a cultural thing in how we train and mindset. And because of that, in 2019, what you're seeing upcoming in the fall with our in-service training is very specific training for our sergeants and our supervisors, so they know what's expected of them and what their roles are. And they're not only learning what's expected of them as a sergeant or a supervisor, but they're also learning what their people beneath them are learning, what their officers are. So it's far more robust types of training that we'll be receiving. Prior to me arriving, all in-service training, everyone attended together, from the chief all the way down to the line level officer. So everybody's learning the same thing at the same time. And so the difference, what I hope to see moving forward, is when we break out these trainings, when the sergeants train with each other and the lieutenants and the captains and commanders train with each other, everybody's learning their roles. and what their roles and responsibilities are. So that's going to be a huge culture change, but I'm excited about it, and I expect to see some change from that. Acting Commander Bell is here with me and can also answer any questions. He's been working very closely with implementing the recommendations over the years, and we're, again, appreciative for the opportunity to be able to speak before you publicly, but we'd really like to be able to answer any questions that you might have.
Commissioner Hurst.
Good afternoon, Chief and Commander Bell, or Acting Commander Bell. My question has to do with, Chief, it says that you said that we could not videotape officers, and it was a collective bargaining agreement. Why would that be a collective bargaining agreement?
It's my belief, and I'll let you chime in as well, with the advice from the city attorney's office, anything that could lead to discipline of an officer is subject to negotiation or sitting across the table from the union.
So that's just advice. That doesn't mean what they're saying makes sense or it's true. It's just their advice.
Well, I think there's nothing to stop us from doing it.
Right, that's my question.
And I obviously think that it suits us better for anything that we implement to sit down at the table with them, so no one's blindsided, so we're all on the same page and we're all invested in what we're trying to do.
I appreciate that, Chief, because I do think that we have this mindset that we can't do anything with policing unless we're talking about the bargaining agreement. And there's just so many things that are outside of the bargaining agreement that we refuse to address. And that's been a big problem over the years, so I appreciate that. Assistant Commander Bell, do you have a response to this particular question?
No, same as what the chief basically said, is that's been the advice we've been given, and like she said, it's because it's part of the discipline process, but, so that's where we're at.
I don't understand if it's discipline when you're interviewing them about an incident they've been involved in. I mean, we haven't even gotten to, well, what if they did something wrong? Because as a community, we'd never get there, right? This is like, what happened? So why do you see that as a disciplinary thing? I'm just not understanding that.
I think what we're saying, anything that can lead to discipline, but I also don't see it as a bad thing. And I think we're making the assumption that the union would be against it. A lot of what we're doing is, just making sure that we're working in alignment with contemporary best practices. And I think we'd be surprised if they were here at the table, whether or not they would be, supportive of that. I don't want to speculate and speak for them.
Thank you, I appreciate that. My other question has to do with, are we still acting like we have a 48-hour rule?
So what we are doing is we are going by what the city council enacted as part of our policy, that we interview officers within 48 hours of the incident.
The OIR report appears to say that we go up to 47 hours in most cases, and then sometimes it's actually longer than 48 hours. I'm concerned because I don't think that was the intent of the city council. I think the terminology was that we would interview officers as quickly as possible after an incident happened. But I think the practice that we have found ourselves in is waiting until the 47th and a half hour before we do the interview. Is there an opportunity to change that so that we're actually interviewing as quickly as we possibly can, like we do with other witnesses to an event that would take place?
So we certainly do have the opportunity to do that. Part of the reason why we do wait is because for our investigators, it's better for them to gather information before they ask those questions, and that's why we're doing it the way we're doing it now. Typically, those interviews are coming in, I would say closer to like 36 hours after the incident, but I'm not sure. I have to look back at the list. I'm not sure that any of the incidents that they reviewed, I think just 2 of the incidents they reviewed were immediately after the change of the policy.
Well, yes, they did allude to over and over again, hoping that we will get more to there as soon as possible rather than sticking to the as late as we possibly can. Thank you for that.
Could I jump in on that? Could we get some data on that? Because I'm not sure I agree that we've been in violation of the 48-hour rule. So rather than speculate, could we actually get the data back?
Yeah, that's easily
Commissioner
possible.
Fritz.
And on that note, there's nothing to say we can't interview them again, right? So
That's
why
true.
would we not interview them right, the person who's most involved, interview them right away, and And then, after they've had that time to settle down, have you thought of anything else that you would like to tell us about what happened? Or we heard this. I mean, I would absolutely, we paid a boatload of money to get rid of the 48-hour rule. And I expected it to be almost immediately that you would be doing those interviews. So I would really encourage you to think about it.
Commissioner David?
I agree with Commissioner Hardesty and Commissioner Fritz on that item. That was a kind of confusing one for me because it didn't seem to really achieve our goal, but I believe in the report it does suggest that we should be conducting those interviews before the shift ends, ideally. I have two questions. I came up last week, it's come up again this week. We're required to have this outside audit of officer involved shootings, sorry. But city code is not clear about who is responsible for ensuring that these recommendations are followed through on, whether that ultimately leads to them being adopted or not. And so I'm interested in, how we can work together to ensure that more of these 191 recommendations are, that the Bureau is largely in agreement with, become part of our policy. Is it internal? Is it the council? Is it expanding the scope of work with the entity that we use to do the audits? And this is not a particular criticism of the Bureau. I think this is a citywide issue. I mean, we see so many items every year. We deal with so many different issues. We make great decisions every week, but without anyone holding us accountable, it's easy for things to slip through the cracks.
I think we'd be great at taking lead in that. And, obviously we can track, we can go through, we've already done that. Acting Commander Bell was very instrumental in putting together the spreadsheet that we have.
Thank you,
And I
Commander
think, given that we've already taken the lead on that, we can turn that into an action plan and then share that, and we can all come together and see if what we come up with is the best plan or if there's tweaks that need to be made.
That sounds great. And bearing in mind that some of these recommendations are not concrete steps so much as culture changes within the Bureau, and also, as was highlighted, some of them pertain to very rare instances, so we don't have opportunities to test them out.
Yeah,
so.
but I think there's also ways though that we can show that we have proper systems in place.
Yeah.
And whether it's the system, and then also, as folks alluded to, consequences or accountability. If someone steps outside, either on the individual level or if there's a systemic issue, we need to make sure that there's something in place to ensure that we catch it and do something about it.
And I had one more question, but Mary, did you want to weigh in on that?
No, go ahead, please.
My other question is, got Daryl Turner's rather incendiary response to this report. And in closing, he suggests that because you have approved all the recommendations, some of which may be subject to collective bargaining, that this represents a per se unfair labor practice under Oregon law. My understanding is when we accept a report, we're accepting the report. We're not, it doesn't constitute approval or adoption of the recommendations. So two parts, I guess. What is your response to that accusation? And two, I could really use clarity on what pieces of police policy fall under collective bargaining and what we actually have the ability to change outside of the bargaining process, because that has been a real obstacle for me in my office.
So again, I will restate that I believe it's important for all of us to work together. This is a city issue. And when I say that, that means having the union at the table when we do that. And I'll leave that at that. With With that said, you know, labor rights versus management rights, obviously the city attorney can provide a little bit more on that. Anything that impacts working conditions, and changes to that, or anything that could impact pay, or again, when we talk about disciplinary matters, anything that could lead to discipline, we need to make sure that the union is involved and at the table. And I like to also make sure that we establish lines of communication with both unions, all unions that we have, before we implement anything that's going to have a huge change in the work that's going to be done. So I think collaboration is important on the front end. Some things, you know, we need to sit down and talk about and actually agree upon, and then there are other things that don't.